I don't believe in accidents. I've said it in my book, and there are so many times that throughout my life that people would call them coincidences or accidents. But looking back, I can see how God has set up these divine appointments so many times that led to the next thing or led to the next chapter here in my life. Today is one of those moments, guys. This episode you're watching is not an accident. You are here for a divine appointment from God and with God. And so my guest today stirs my heart so much. He's such an amazing friend, and he is doing something in what I call one of the most important, if not the most important, ministries of the church. God's heart is for children. In Texas alone, there are over 30,000 kids in our foster system waiting to be adopted. And he said those numbers are actually expected to go over 40,000 when the latest reports come out due to the pandemic and everything that has caused even more more kids needing to be adopted. That's just in Texas. We're going to stick around to the very end because we're going to give you 3 opportunities, no matter which category you fit in, of how you can help these kids. Some is as easy as just praying. Every one of us can do that. But you want to stick to the end because we are making an impact. We are providing hope for these kids. All that and more happens right after this. Welcome back to the When Words Don't Come Easy podcast. Today is going to be so special. For one, it's a dear friend of mine who I've known for a long time. He may even share a story of when I don't even remember this, but he always tells me that I used to update him when I was just a wee lad on sports events. But anyways, I've known Kyle. He's been a friend of the family for some 30 plus years. I know that. Yes. I'm not going to say how old, but he also went to school with my brothers, as I've had recent guests on the podcast who did as well. But just a dear friend of mine. He's a pastor. He's also got his hands in a lot of things that are going to be very dear to your heart. And I just want to welcome Kyle Bateman to the podcast.
Yay. Andy, it's an honor to be here with you today. We are so proud of you and Tiffany, all the great things you guys are doing. You're heroes to us. And again, this is a dream come true, getting to be with Andy Howard today.
No, man, it's my dream come true. It's my pleasure. Kyle, gosh, you're a pastor, and you're also doing this new thing, and it's not really new. How many years have you been doing this now? But you're helping with orphans. I know you help with phased in. You can explain what phased in is and that whole process, but now you've taken it even another step further. So just kind of tell us what's going on in your world these days.
Sure. My wife, Patty, and I have been pastoring here in Wichita Falls, Texas for the past 23 years. We pastor Evangel Church. And about 10 years ago, I was at a conference and heard a story that just blew me away. My wife and I have 2 beautiful children. They're both grown now, and they're both adopted. They are adopted from the nation of Haiti. We went over there on a missions trip 2 decades ago and found this beautiful little 4-year-old boy who weighed 23 pounds, who was almost dead when we found him, and nursed him back to health. God spoke to us. We began a 1.5-year process to bring him home. And along that journey, we discovered this little baby who just kept walking up to us with these big, beautiful brown eyes, a beautiful little baby girl. And when we got approved for adoption, they said, you've been approved to adopt 2 children. So we went and got Luke and Naphtali. They are now our kids. So we've always been adoptionaholics, but I've never stopped to think about what happens to the kids who don't get adopted. And that became all too real to me at a conference that I was at 10 years ago when I heard a story about 18-year-old young men and women, basically boys and girls. I'm 57 years old, so 18 years old, they're still kind of kids to me, being dropped off in the middle of Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles on their 18th birthday because the homeless shelter down the street was full, and because their foster families didn't get any more money. They had no place to go. So I heard those stories, and I came back to Texas and found out that there are 1,200 to 1,500 young boys and girls. When they turn 18, they're basically out. They're out of the system, and if they have not made a connection, they have nowhere to go. There's there's like I said, 12 to 1,500 every year, and I just heard that, and I thought we got to do something. So I asked around to see what was being done, and there were some okay things being done, but I didn't think anything up to the quality of what these young people deserve. So we started Phased In. It's now 9 years old. It took us a little over a year to get the groundwork laid. We've now had over 100 young men and women that are forever part of our family that come to phasedin.org, get to stay as long as they need to. We become a family to them because we believe that God never intended for babies, children, teenagers to be raised by a system. He intended for them to be raised, brought up, encouraged by a family. And so that's what Phased In is. And so from that, I also became involved in adoption work. And for the last 6 years, I've been working with Family First out of the North Texas District.
I love that, man. I absolutely love that. And I know children are the heart of God. That's you see
Yes,
it all throughout scripture. And absolutely breaks my heart. I got to have lunch with you recently, and it just you and you'll probably share some of these stories here today, but story after story are just like gut wrenching stories. And sometimes we forget, and it's not on purpose, but we're all in our own little bubble and we get busy and we're doing our things and we forget how blessed we all are. And you were sharing that about phased in. I love just even the name of that because the term that they use is phased out at
absolutely.
18. They call it phased out. They're actually they too old, so they become 18 and they're phased out. And you guys have began this called phased in ministry, and so I just absolutely love everything about it. And then even taking it a step further with the foster care system. So you were sharing with me earlier, there are at last reports you had heard 30,000 30,000 kids in our foster care system in Texas
In
alone.
Texas alone. Yeah. It's
30,000 kids looking for a forever home. So that is
yes.
just staggering. Will you mind sharing some of these stories that you shared with me? Some of these amazing kids, and just how God is using your ministry with some of these kiddos.
It's incredible, Andy. It is the biggest need in every big city or every small town all across Texas and really across the country. There are children that have been abandoned, they have been orphaned, they have been neglected, they have uh, lost probably what was supposed to be their most important relationship of their life because of things beyond their control. And so, because of that, there is a system that is everybody knows is not the answer, that is overflowing. And after the pandemic, we are now expecting those numbers to climb to well over 40,000 kids in the state of Texas who are dreaming of the kind of life that we have. I can tell you story after story of kids right now that are ready to be adopted. We do a camp every year for older kids in the foster care system that, barring some miracle, they're going to phase out without having a forever family. But we've had some of the kids that have come through those camps whose stories are unbelievable. There was one girl at our camp this year who's 17 years old. She has a 5-year-old child. She was molested when she was 12 years old. And instead of having an abortion like some of her family wanted her to do, at 12 years of age, she had a child. She has not had a relationship with that young son of hers who's now in kindergarten, and she's still a kid herself. But at launch camp, when she came this year, I remember after one of our phased in girls shared her testimony, how phased in brought her love and a family and acceptance and a place to just, a place to develop and grow. She walked up to her and asked her if she would pray with her and said, I want to get back into my son's life. I'm only 17 years old. When I turn 18, I want to be ready. I want to have an education. I want to have a job because I want to be the mom that I never had. I want to be the family that I never had. And there are kids like that, I think everybody has their dream of they want to go get little orphan Annie and whatever. A lot of these kids have been through nightmares we can't imagine. And the trauma that they've experienced, it's not for everybody to adopt or to foster. But there are people listening to this podcast that I believe the Lord has tapped on the shoulder, prepared them to do what my wife and I thought we could never do. We thought, man, we can't adopt a kid. We're not prepared for this. There are those that if you'll just take that step, there are kids out there with story after story that have gone through abuse after abuse, that are just all they need is a chance. And they're not foster kids, they're kids. They're tired of that stigma. They're tired of being shoved in a corner. They're tired of being looked at like they're different. They're boys and girls that just need an opportunity to discover who they are, and a family that'll support them and love them through their trials and tribulations of their childhood years, their teen years, and I believe that's our future. One of the reasons we started Phased In was that we heard that the prison systems of America base their future inmate population on the number of kids who phase out of foster care.
Wow.
That means if we don't find a family for them, that's where they're headed. They're going to be part of the negative aspect of our society, because of survival skills, rebellion, different things like that. And so that's why it's so important, Andy, that I travel all over the state and find those who are ready, and who are, even if they don't think they're ready, who are called to foster, adopt, or provide respite care for these kids.
Simply amazing, man. I have so much respect for what you're doing. I
Thank you, sir.
I do. And so at our lunch the other day, so it may have been a month ago now. I don't, time flies, but when you were talking, my heart was stirred for our best friends that we've done life with over the last, gosh, 15 years now. And they've always wanted to adopt, and they hit several obstacles, and they just kind of had gave up on it. And for whatever reason, you were talking about that. You were talking about that tap on the shoulder,
Yeah.
that tap on the heart from the Holy Spirit right now. I feel like that's happening all over, wherever you're listening right now. And I just wanted to say, because I went home and I told them, I told you I was
Yeah.
going to do this too. I said, I can't wait till I get home. I'm going to tell them. And sure enough, that night we reached out to you, and they've already begun the process, and who
They
knows what
are.
happens, but they're a couple of weeks into all the work in the checklist, and they're well on their way. But you shared something that night, or it was actually the next morning on a Zoom, and I was hoping you would share that here
Okay.
about the calling that you talked about, just like as and they're pastors, and you're like,
Yes.
just like they became pastors, that they were called to pastor, you're also called to adopt. And so for those who may be hearing that or feeling that in their heart right now, would you go ahead and confirm that about that calling and taking that next step?
Absolutely. I've heard the call of God to go into ministry in 1985, and in 1986 I was a youth pastor. I knew it was something I had to do. It's kind of like, Jonah when he's called to go to Nineveh. He runs and he goes to Tarshish, and the Lord says, "Okay, that call, that was for yesterday. That's for today. That's forever. That doesn't go away." And I think there are some people listening to this podcast that they've thought about, I can do it. They've had a desire to do it, and have even maybe taken a step. And one of the things, Andy, that brings such discouragement is the process. And when you're working with the state, you're working with people that don't get it in a lot of areas. Now, there are some great leaders in the state. There are some great leaders that are part of DFPS, CPS, different things like that. I believe they're called into the position that they're in also. If you go into it as a career opportunity, it's going to fail. If you begin adopting kids because you want to be a hero, it's going to fail. If you do it for the money, and some people we've seen through Phased In have become foster parents because there is a stipend that they receive, and they see that as somehow being lucrative. We've had too many kids phase out that were in bad foster homes. And that's why we praise God for those who do it the right way and understand it's not easy. Understand it is something that it is going to test you to your limits. But when you are called of God, and that is your assignment, that is what will fulfill that void in your life, and that's that divine calling that you were put on this earth to fulfill. There's nothing like it. We've raised two kids. It hasn't been easy. In fact, there have been times when I just want to throw up my hands and say, I don't know what I'm doing. But when you look back on the journey, you say, I couldn't have done anything else, because it was the fulfillment of why God put me here for such a time as this.
For sure, man. And rips my heart every time I hear that. And even as I think that's in every phase of parenting.
Yeah,
Sometimes I'm like, I am the worst dad of all time, but being there, being there is what makes the difference. There was our pastor recently was doing a series on men, fatherhood, and he threw out a stat that 94% of, and I'm going to butcher this, but I hope you'll hang with me for a second, but the effect of others becoming to know Christ. That's what it was. When a dad gets saved, 94% of the family comes to know Christ when the dad gets saved, which I know that's a totally different podcast, but that's just all part of this whole thing, bringing in kids and the importance of parenthood for them and an opportunity that so many of us take for granted. If we have parents, my mom and dad were the best ever. So
they
grateful
were.
for them. So grateful. And I would say I don't even realize this. And it's because it's out of sight. I never really thought about special needs kids before. It wasn't that I didn't love them, but until we
Yeah,
had Peyton,
yeah,
we were just not open to it. We weren't aware of it. And
that's
now
right.
after meeting with you, now I can't help but think about how many kids are out there looking for parents. Uh, Tell some of the other things you kind of touched on in a minute, but you guys do a huge camp every year. What are some of the other
Yeah.
ways you bless kids with your ministry?
Oh, at launch camp, I have been speaking at launch camp for several years. This past year, I opened my big mouth and made a commitment that I would go around the state raising enough money to pay for every kid who wanted to go to launch camp to go to launch camp. And because God's grace is just as big or bigger, a lot bigger than my mouth, He opened the door, and we were able to pay for 32 older teenagers to come to their own camp. And these young people were amazing, Andy. They had the time of their life. It's important when you get around people who've been through the same thing that you've been through. You can say I know how you feel, but until you get around people that have been on the same journey, there were friendships made. There were lifelong relationships built at that camp. And so we're going to do it again this year. Word is getting out. We couldn't do it for 2 years because of the pandemic. And now we're back this year, and we're already expecting twice as many young people to come next year. We travel around, and part of the reason we raise funds is because we go into churches that when they say, we want your team to come, but we can't afford to have you, we're like, it's okay. We can pay our own way because of the support that we get, because we don't want the one child whose life is going to be changed because you got one family in your church that's going to step up, answer that call, and bring that child or sibling group into their family. So we raise funds so that we're able to go into big churches and small churches. I was just in a little church in East Texas just a couple of weeks ago where they obviously didn't have the funds because of the way the pandemic had affected their church, but because we were able to come, there were families that stepped up out of that church that heard the stories, that were inspired, that understood their assignment and stepped up to do that. So we do that. There's just so many things. We're available to churches that have questions that sometimes you just need to ask, how can we do this? We get calls from people who have young people that have aged out of foster care. I got a call one time from a professor at Baylor University that said, I got a young man sleeping on my floor. Could you come get him? He's aged out of the foster care system, and he's basically 18 and homeless. And so I went down the next day and got him and brought him to be at Phased In. A few weeks later, I get another call from a young person who was a college basketball player up in Minnesota who was moved down to the San Antonio area that had no place to go. A friend of his contacted me. I picked him up at a park bench. He had been mugged the night before, beaten up. Can you imagine mugging and beating up a homeless teenager and taking what little money he had? And he was left bloody. And so I took him immediately to a Nike store and bought him some clothes and brought him all the way back to Phased In. And those two young men have been two of the greatest young men that we've had in the Phased In family. So there's all kinds of things that we do, anything and everything related to orphan care. We want to be a part from prevention to permanency in the lives of these kids.
I absolutely love that. So good. And I mean, think about it. I know when I was 18, I thought I knew it all. And
Yeah.
looking back, I can remember, man, I was such a baby, young. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean I knew nothing. And can you imagine? Because I was so blessed with the foundation I had at 18. But I cannot imagine trying to find your place in this world with all the obstacles and all the challenges coming your way, even at just 18 years old. So,
Yeah.
and we will dive into more, but I just have this on my heart before I forget, and I don't want to. So, for the next couple minutes, how someone's already convicted. I can tell they're convicted. They want to know more. One, maybe it's just to support. Maybe it is full on adoption, and they want to do the process. How do they find you? How do they find your ministry? Throw out some contacts, how they can connect with you, or websites or whatever they need.
Yeah, anybody interested in Phased In, you can go to phased.in.org and see all the information there for the young people that age out. Any area of support you want to give there. We're about to open a campus in Arlington, and when that campus opens in DFW, it's going to be full because there's hundreds of kids in the DFW area. That will be a campus for young ladies, and then we're going to take the campus in Wichita Falls, turn it back to be a campus for young men so that we don't have to turn anybody down. As far as having a desire to foster, adopt, or provide respite care, we work with an amazing agency called A World for Children. They are incredible. They are relationship based. They have a great team all the way up from their executive director to all of their caseworkers and everything. You can go to their website. I don't have that with me. It's a world. You can Google A World for Children. They have offices in 10 of the 11 regions in the state of Texas. So when I go into churches, we bring a representative from A World for Children. They have hundreds of kids available right now that are ready right now to find a forever family. And so we really encourage people, if you're going to go through the licensing process, make sure you do it through an agency that's doing it for the right reasons. And we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly there. And a lot of people get discouraged because the agency they're working with, they don't have the same passion and zeal and the same kind of follow up and follow through as the applicant does. So that's why we're very careful about who we partner with. And again, I'm with Family First in the North Texas District of the Assemblies of God. If you'd like for us to come speak to your business, your church, whatever, they can contact you, Andy. You feel free to give out my personal information if it's a friend of yours. And I want to say this too. I've known Andy for a long time, and his dad and mom. His dad was like my dad when I was in Bible college. There is not a man that has ever walked this earth that I have ever looked up to more than Reverend James Howard. He is a hero. And I think one of the reasons, Andy, that this need is so great is because we have a fatherless generation that don't know that kind of love that you and your brothers had. And I saw that love in action. And Jamie, your brother, would tell me stories of your dad being a true kingdom dad during good times and during rough times. And what these kids need right now in a fatherless generation is that love of the Heavenly Father and that love of an earthly father that will just put their arms of protection, unconditional love around
Yeah.
these kids and walk them through their journeys. And so we at Family First and Phased In, we want to be a part of the solution. So if people are hearing this and say, what, and you want to give them my personal information, you can do that.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Thank you, Kyle. I love that. So you mentioned camp. You mentioned you guys brought 32 last year. In our lunch, I may be wrong, so you can help me with the numbers, but
You
is
bet.
it around $1,000 per kid to get there? Because they have to be flown in, some of these kids, right?
Well,
Or
yeah, we had to drive them in from the
drive.
valley. We
Okay.
had groups that came in all the way from down on the border, and that's another thing with all the immigration things going on. That's swelling the system with children, innocent
Yeah.
children. No matter what your political beliefs are, these kids don't have politics. They are
Yeah.
they are put in bad situations, and they're in a life and death struggle. So if the state gets them through the documentation aspect of it, they got nowhere. And so that is another issue that down the road we're going to have to face. Also, with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, I know we all celebrated the victory for life, but the truth is now there's going to be more and more children that are going to be born into this world that are unprotected, that are unwanted, and many times even unloved by their own biological family. And so, because some of these children are forced upon these families, there's such a great need now for more and more in the area of foster care and adoption to do it the right way. So, yeah, there to get the kids to camp cost about $1,000 because these kids have all experienced trauma. We
Yeah.
basically have to have a licensed counselor with each camper. We have to have a 1-to-1 ratio.
Wow.
So we have to pay for them their travel expenses to come also. So for them to stay for that week, it costs around $1,000 to sponsor a camper.
Well, I asked that because I know there's people listening right now who have already been stirred by this, and they may not even know the need or how big the need. And then it's Christmas time. I'm not sure exactly when this one will air, but it will be either just past Christmas or right before Christmas. So many needs for your kiddos, whether it's in foster care or through these other agencies you guys help and your support. Uh, they can help with that too, right? They can help with. I'm sure there's ways of making donations. What can they help in that area?
Absolutely. If there are individuals or businesses that would like to give $1,000 to sponsor a kid for camp, that would be huge. Or $500 for a half sponsorship, or 250. All that adds up, and that's how we got it done last year. Again, we're expecting probably at least 50 campers this year, so that means our budget is going to increase. But I want to tell you, this is a life changing camp.
Yeah.
I'm there every day. I'm there playing basketball with the guys, building relationships, spending time with them, and I'm an old geezer. So if I can get out there, if I get my old carcass out there, I had one kid challenge me to a one-on-one, and I'm like, okay. And he started doing a little trash talking, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to dust off the old and and finally we got down and I ended up beating him, and I'm like, I didn't want to have to do that. And then he came and said, man, you're really good for an old man. And it was a young man that had kind of been off on his own. And here's a great story. And I pulled him aside and I said, are you liking launch camp? He said, yeah. He said, I can't act like I'm liking it though. And I said, how come? He said, because if I let them know how important this is to me, every time I get close to somebody, I always lose them. And he said, I'm real careful not. He said they probably think I'm, not liking it. I'm kind of a case here, but he said this is really an incredible week for me. And these people you can tell are real genuine. But I don't want to start loving them because everybody I start loving, I always lose. And that's the kind of kids that we've got coming to launch camp. And if there are those that could sponsor these kids, and that young man made a point to go up to him at that last day of camp and say, hey, it's okay. It's safe to be vulnerable because we're not going to burn you. We're not going to leave you. And I even said, look, I'll give you my cell number if you need somebody to talk to. If you need, and that's what these kids need. They have had instability their entire life. And I always make this point too, Andy. Since the pandemic hit, you and I and all your listeners have known a world for a couple of years now of isolation and uncertainty. The kids that we serve, that's the only life they've ever known.
Wow.
They've only known isolation, being shoved in a corner. We had one young man that didn't want to come to our Christmas party plans because when he was in foster care, his foster family told him, we're going to have our Christmas out here. You go wait in there. And then later on, we'll bring you out after we've opened our gifts. So he said, if I'm not good enough for Christmas, I don't want to celebrate it. These kids have
Oh
known
man.
that isolation and stigma of just being treated like that. They've also known uncertainty because the minute they start loving something, it's gone. The minute they feel like the foster family they're with has seen them through enough that they can trust them, sometimes the family bails out. Sometimes they go from placement to placement. We had one young man in phased in that had been in 27 different placements. When I asked him where he was from, he started laughing and said, I've been everywhere, man, like that song. I've been all over Texas. You name a town, I've lived there. Well, what kind of a stability is this child going to have? He's
Yeah.
got that uncertainty, got that isolation. The Lord opened my eyes to show that, to say, you're kind of getting a glimpse of the world, not just a period of time, but the world that these kids come out of.
Man, that that's staggering.
Yeah.
Thinking about it that way, the numbers just from what I've experienced through depression and anxiety, those numbers have skyrocketed since 2020, and
Yes.
this is every day for them, for these kids. That if that doesn't move you, I don't know what will.
And you know what? Their developmental years is when they
So
experienced
important.
the
Yeah.
trauma that we haven't even scratched the surface as to what an impact that trauma has had upon their life that will, barring a miracle, affect every aspect of their life for the rest of their life. And so that's
Wow.
why you got to be called to go into this battlefield. And when you're called, know that there are others going with you. You're never alone. I think the support groups that are springing up are so important. And to know there's probably some listeners out there that were adopted or considering adoption. Know this. You said it earlier. This is the heart of God.
Yeah.
James 1:27, religion, pure, undefiled, is seeing after the widows and the orphans in the very hour of their distress. And it doesn't get any more biblical or kingdom than that.
That's amazing. That surely is. And every time I get to meet with you, my heart is even stirred even more. So I thank you for your time today. In closing, is there anything that you haven't got to share that you have, or whatever you feel the Lord leading on your heart right now? Maybe for that person who is they're on the fence. They've been thinking about it and they feel that tug, they feel that call that we mentioned, but are just scared to
Yeah.
act on it. What kind of advice or words would you have for them?
Fear has kept so many children from being rescued, and it isn't their fear. It's the fear of those that say, well, this might be, you know, an interruption in my life that would take away some things. I think rather than looking at what it takes away, understand that if God has prepared you for this and give you a desire for this, what He will add is far greater than what He will take away. And I see that every time I look at my grandchildren, and I see that I wouldn't have them in my life if we wouldn't have fought through those tough teenage years of bringing our kids through those battles and knowing that every reward is there for those who don't give up, who don't quit. And I would say if you have a stirring, test the water, step out in faith, because the best foster families that we've ever seen are the ones that went into it saying, I don't know how to do this, but I love these kids. I'm willing to give my life to see their life become a kid. They end up being the happiest, most fulfilled, and greatest successes. So I would just say, yeah, there it is. It isn't easy. It isn't going to be perfect, but if you're willing to go the distance, there is no greater reward that you will see on this earth than to see a child's life changed.
Wow. Tiff and I always say, when we do hard things, we always say that for the Howards, we do
Yeah,
hard things, and we'll even say, do it scared. Now on this,
yeah,
I do want to make sure that you feel that calling and you are doing it for the right reasons, as he mentioned
yeah,
earlier. But if you feel that on your heart and you're wanting to, just do it scared, and God will provide everything you need. He'll provide the patience, He'll provide
yes,
the income and the support, but He
yes,
will provide everything you need to do this on the journey. He's not going to leave you once you once you sign
yeah,
the dotted line. He's not going to say, okay, now you're on your own. So
yeah.
He'll take care of you. So
And if you're not scared, something's wrong. If you
yes,
think, yeah, I got this, those are the people that end up ignoring the children, whatever, do it for the wrong reason. That passion. I still get in the pulpit and I'm scared that I'm not going to preach the right thing. It's
yeah,
still that those butterflies of,
healthy butterflies. Yeah,
yeah, those of knowing, man, I don't want to mess this up because this could be incredible. And I think going into that, whether it's sowing a seed into a big project, whether it's taking a big step of faith, whether it's doing something beyond anything you thought you could ever do. If you don't have that, then something's wrong. But with God on your side, there's no mountain too great. There is no miracle that is too big that God cannot open the door and propel you into.
amen. Well, that looks like a good spot to close this one out on. This is a podcast of hope. That's what I'm
Yes,
always, the whole reason I do this is for hope. And this episode, especially, will you share this? There's someone, even if you can't do, there's one or three things you can do. You can definitely pray and you can pray for support or you can
yes,
support them. But the last thing you can definitely share this to someone else who may have this call on their heart and don't even realize it right now. God has laid them on your heart. So please share this, not for anything that I get out of this. Who knows what will happen from the podcast point, but that they were waiting for this divine appointment. I don't believe in accidents. And I
right.
think this very moment you're here listening to this for a reason. And there is someone else out here waiting for this message. So please share that. Thank you for being a part of this. It's been so fun. As always, this is Kyle Bateman. If, as he said earlier, if you're wanting more information about him, feel free to reach out to me and I will help you with that. You can also go to, gosh, help me again with the two places that they can go to find out more, Kyle.
Okay, you can go to
Phased
phased.org
in.
to make
Yes.
sure that that's in any way that you may want to, if you want to give toward phased in, or if you have any interest in the kids who age out of foster care. And if you want to go give toward um, Family First, which I'm the director of, you can go to give.northtexas.ag and you can put 14-4003 in the giving instructions, or if you just want to go through there and you have a question, or if you want to get in touch with the agency, you can go to A World for Children. That's AWFC, I think, .org, aworldforchildren.org, and they will get you started on that journey.
We're going to put all this in the links and even in the article that comes with this podcast as well. So you'll have it in writing. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this. Share it, share the story because there's little kids' lives at stake. I believe that. And this is not an accident that you're watching this. So thank you for being a part of it. As always, you can find out more information at andyhoward.com. We are going to put some more of this podcast right there. And if you haven't signed up, please sign up for the newsletter. Our team works very hard to bring value to you through that newsletter from different organizations like the one you heard about today, and we're always sharing whatever the latest is going on through our ministry. So thank you so much for doing that. It's been an honor having Kyle with us, and until next time, we'll see you. God bless. Thanks so much for tuning in. If this episode helped you in any way, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review and share it with somebody else. Thanks so much. I'll catch you next time.